Alrighty, folks. So let's get into our next game design video. So in this video, what we're going to be focusing on is fixing some colliders for your ramp tiles. We're going to fix, by doing that, we're also going to create an issue with our character collider and the collider for that ramp, which we're also going to fix. And then after that, we're going to add our background, and we're going to create a very simple parallax effect script that will come in handy if you are able to create a layered background. If you have all of your layers separated for your background, you can go ahead and do it. If not, and you just want to use a solid background, that's totally fine too. The parallax effect is still going to be able to work no matter what, and we'll go into those details later on. So let's go ahead and get started. So in Ms. Kiselwitz's and I's little practice project that we have here, our tile set did not have ramps. So I went ahead and imported another one that we're going to use. I went ahead and sliced it up already, but we'll just do a quick recap of how to create another tile map. So I'm going to go to Game Object, 2D Object, Tile Map, and I'm going to create a rectangular tile map. Again, you do not have to do this part because you already did this. And if your tile map already has ramps in it, you don't need to redo this process. This is just a recap, just in case. Repetition is good. So I'm going to name this tile map 2. So we have our grid and where our tile map is going to go. So now down here, actually I'm going to open a window, and I'm going to open the 2D tile palette window, and you can see that I have tile map 2 selected, and I want to create a new palette that I'm going to call terrain 2. Click create. We'll save it here. Perfect. And I'm just going to click and drag our asset right into here. Perfect. And this is going into my tiles folder, because remember, it's going to slice up each individual thing. So I'm going to select folder right there. Perfect. Now, before we start painting tiles, there's something that we are going to have to go back and do, that you are going to have to do as well in your project. So in our tile map that we have here, if we go to the inspector, you can see that we have a tile map collider, a rigid body 2D, and a composite collider 2D. Go ahead and delete or remove each of those components, because we're going to have to make a change to our tile palette in order for our colliders for our ramps to re-render and work properly. So very first step is to go in here and delete each of your, there we go, is to delete each of your tile map colliders, your composite collider, and then your rigid body 2D. And then we'll be able to go in and make custom changes to our tile set. So now what I'm going to do is, going into our tile set, I'm going to go into Sprite Editor, and what I'm going to select is Custom Physics Shape, because by default, if we just use allow Unity to create the collider for us when we create a tile map collider 2D based on the shape of our tiles, it can sometimes get things wrong, especially with ramps. So we're just going to avoid that whole issue, and we're going to give it custom properties. So Sprite Editor, Custom Physics Shape, and I'm going to go to this ramp right here. You'll have to do this for each of your ramps, but I'm just going to do it for this one specifically. And I'm just going to draw a shape like that. And all I'm going to do is pull each of these edges to the corners like that. I'm going to select this and hit the delete key. Now, reminder, that was not the backspace key, that was the delete key, just FYI. So now what's going to happen is Unity is going to reference this custom physics shape when creating the 2D tile map collider. Okay, so now that we have this created, I'm going to click apply and it's going to update. So in my instance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tile palette and I'm going to start drawing some tiles here. Go into terrain 2 and I'm going to put one like right here. We'll make a ramp going up like this. Like that. And let's just say we'll go to right here. Oops. All right. So now I can go into my inspector. I can select our tile map here, and I can go ahead and add our tile map collider 2D, and you can see that it is in fact using our new custom custom physics for this particular collider for this tile, which is perfect. So now what I need to do is do what we did before, which is add a composite collider 2D, which is also going to automatically create the rigid body for me. And in the tile map collider 2D, I'm going to select use by composite. So we just get rid of all of those individual slices that we don't need for our colliders. And again, just a reminder, do not have to go through all those steps because you already have your grid with your tile map already created. And all you have to do is go into your sprite editor and add that custom physics shape for your ramps. So that way Unity will reference that and you'll have a nice clean collider for your character to interact with. So let's go ahead and play this. All right, so I'm coming along and oops, I totally forgot to do something. So what I forgot to do is go into my rigid body 2D and set it as static. All right, now we're good to go. All right, so notice that when my character collides with this ramp, something interesting is happening. Notice how it looks kind of off, right? He's like kind of floating in the air as he's climbing up this. That is because we're using a box collider for our character. And when you're going up slopes like this, it's not really the most ideal type of collider to use. We actually want to use something called a capsule collider. Some of you may already have added capsule colliders to your player sprite. But for those of you that have not, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that now. So I'm just going to select my player game object here. And you can see I have my box collider there. I'm going to go into the inspector. I'm going to go down to my box collider 2D. I'm going to click on the three dots here and I'm going to remove component. Now our character does not have any kind of collider, which is not good. It needs a collider to behave properly with our physics. So I'm going to add a capsule collider 2D. And I'm not going to leave it as is because that doesn't really fit the shape of our character well. So I'm going to go to Edit Collider. And we're just going to shrink this down and shape it the way that we need. This will come down to like right there. Perfect. So now, when I play, we're going to notice a much more natural looking ascension of our ramp over here. There we go. Looks a lot better than it did before. And we could probably even tweak this a little bit more. Bring this in a little bit higher like that, and it actually might look even a little bit better. go. Yep, looking good. Awesome. Okay. So now that we have all of that, we can go ahead and start adding our background to our scene here. You should already have your background asset created. I've created a folder here that has just a few different backgrounds that Skizowitz and I will be using. So what we're going to do for that is I'm just going to create an empty game object that I'm going to call background. And just for the sake of organization, I'm going to place this up here under our main camera. It doesn't really matter, but it just makes things a little bit more organized for me. Okay, so for this, what we're going to do, I'm going to add a renderer, a sprite renderer specifically, to this. And I'm going to select one of the backgrounds that I have. I'm going to use this one. And I'm just going to scale this up and make changes to it, just so that it'll look good when we start playing our game and we won't, see our gray or blue background. Just up to like right about there. That should be fine. And notice how my other tile map is behind the background. That is because I have not changed the order in layer to 1. So something that you're going to notice when you add your background is it's most likely going to go above everything in your scene. So in order to fix that, all you have to do is go to each individual game object that you want to make sure is above the background, select it, and then under Sprite Renderer, just look over at the order in layer and change that to 1. Your background will have an order in layer of 0, meaning that it is the farthest thing away from the camera. And then everything else will have a value of 1, meaning that it is closer to the camera. So my tile map here has a value of 1, and then my other tile map here has a value of 1. Perfect. So with our new background, we can go ahead and click play. We may need to make some changes to this. You can see, obviously, I need to make the background larger, which is totally fine. But at least we have a functioning background at the moment. And now we're going to add a nice parallax effect to this so that the background kind of gently moves as we are moving along our level. So very first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to scale this up because I need this to be larger in order for this to work properly. And we'll bring this up to like right here. Bring it over here. Okay. So let's just see how that looks really quick. Perfect. That's fine for the moment. Okay, so I'm going to go to my scripts folder and I'm going to right click, create a new C# script that I'm going to call Parallax, and that is P-A-R-A-L-L-A-X. Parallax. So what we're making here is going to be a simplified version of the Parallax script that we may need to make refinements to down the road, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All right. So a couple of things that I want to do here. We are going to create a private variable that we're going to call, that's going to be a float, and it's going to be called start position. So start pose. Next, I'm going to make a public variable that I'm going to assign to one of our game objects. Specifically, it's going to be our camera. So we will, in our inspector, assign our main camera to this variable. So it is a game object, and I'll just give it the name of cam for camera. And we're going to make another public variable. It's going to be a float. And let's name this variable, let's name it, let's just name it Parallax Effect. I think that's a good name. Because this is going to dictate exactly how the background moves based on the camera. So in the start method of our script, I am going to update start position or assign a value to start position, I should say. And the position I'm going to give it is the X value of our background. So transform dot position dot X. And then in our update, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new float variable that I'm going to call distance. And I'm going to set this equal to our camera, our camera's X position, transform dot position dot X. And we are going to multiply this by our what our value of our parallax effect variable is going to be, which we are going to assign to inside of our inspector. Okay. And then simply all we have to do is just tell Unity to transform the location of the background. So I'm going to transform dot position, and I'm going to set this equal to a new vector 3. And the values of this, or the parameters of this method, are going to be the start position plus distance. So that's one value. It's going to be then the Y value of our of this game object, which is our background. So transform dot position dot Y. And then lastly is just the Z value, which is transform dot position dot Z. Now we could just put in default values for these. Like I could have just put 0 in that slot, but it's just really good to get in the habit of using the already predefined or preset values for game objects. And the way you do that is just by targeting their transform values for that specific axis. So I could go in and see, okay, what is the Y value of this 7.3, and I could add it in there, but I'm not going to do that. So yeah, the X is changing based on our start position plus the distance, and the distance is being influenced by the X value of our camera multiplied by what our parallax effect variable is going to be. So when your variable is closer to the value of 0, that is a less amount of movement for the background. In fact, a value of 0 means that the background won't move at all. And then a value closer to 1 will be moving at exactly the same pace as the camera, which we don't want. We want a slight delay. So I'm going to give it like a value of 0.25 or 0.5 just to start things off. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. Okay, I don't know what those ID values showed up there. That was very strange, but that went away. So I just reopened it just to make sure. So yeah, it should be void start, void update. Okay, so now I'm going to select our background, and I'm just going to click and drag our component into that. And I need to select what our camera is, and that's going to be our main camera. And our parallax effect, let's give it a value of 0.5. Let's go ahead and hit play. All right. So you can see that there's a slight delay and slight change in movement with our background. And I just realized I forgot to go into our tile map here and set it as ground. There we go. And so now I'll show you the difference between what it looks like when we have a parallax effect going on and when we don't. So let me select the background here. And let's change this to 0. And you can see the background shifted because it is no longer being influenced by the value or the location of the camera. So this is what it looks like with no parallax effect. And if we want to add a parallax effect, let's say 0.5. Now you can see there's just a very slight little delay on the positioning of our background, which is nice. And we can reduce that even more to 0.25. So essentially what you would do is when you have multiple layers for your background, you would create a new game object for each of those layers. So it'd be like background 1, you know, like farthest away background, mid background, closest background. And each of those game objects would have this parallax script assigned to it. And you would simply change the value of the parallax effect for each layer. And so each layer of that background is going to be moving at a different speed than the others. So it'll just create a nice, really great effect of depth. But again, so if you have those layers, great, go ahead and do that. If not, you can use a single background and just have a very simple delay on how that background catches up to the camera as you're moving around. So that's going to be it for this video. Feel free to, you know, tinker around with the size of your background, what works for you, what doesn't. Get something that looks good. Make sure you are adding all these little changes that I have implemented, especially the capsule collider, and making sure that you are creating your own custom colliders for these ramps, because if you let Unity do it, it's not really going to work that super well unless you have a perfectly diagonal line going that way, which you might not. But that's it for this one. See you guys in the next video.